Thank you for tuning in to the World Builder's Anvil, episode 228. Let's build a Gnomish ride.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Gnome rider. Ride a little gnomer. All right, welcome back. My name is Jeffrey W. Ingram, and I am Gnome Rider X.
And I, gnomishly yours, am Michael Miller.
I'm online right now Googling how to legally change my name. I want to be known from here on out as Gnome Rider X.
Gnome Rider X, huh?
Might get me in trouble with Kristen, but whatever. You live once.
Rider X.
I have no idea.
So, this is kind of what sparked our gnome...
Our voyage?
I don't know how we got here, other than it started with the idea of let's build a vehicle. And then...
And I wanted it to be about the gnomes.
Is that how we got there? You just said you wanted a gnome vehicle and...
The first bullet point in the show notes is the gnomes need a ride. And that's what sparked, I think, 3 other episodes at this point?
Yeah.
And a fourth future one on religion?
Gnomish religion, yeah.
It's been quite a little journey getting to this episode, which should have been like 223 or something like that. But now we're up to 228, which is even off from the show notes that I sent to Michael because I thought this was going to be 227. Total chaos.
Always trying to confuse me with the emails. I get the emails, they're like different show notes, different shows, different than what we talked about, and I'm like, just getting confused.
Mm-hmm.
Which, admittedly, it's not that hard to do, but,
Well, that's when we have an idea and then I go and build it. If I don't have any actual notes on what you think when you come up with an idea and I build the show notes, it goes off of what I think, not what you think.
But what I think is always better.
Maybe, but I don't know because you don't tell me that. So.
Well, yeah, because it's better when it comes out freeform during the show.
Oh, yeah. So we have no idea what we're going to talk about. Not that we really stay on topic anyway.
That's true. That's true. Now, originally, I was totally set on wanting a what do you call it? A tripod, tri-walker sort of thing.
Yes.
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the gnomes making some kind of
necessarily
maybe
against it,
steampunky, magic infused, 3-legged walker thing? What comes to mind is are you familiar with the game? Oh gosh, what's the name of it?
Nope.
No. Hang on. It's Defiance, maybe.
I'm familiar with the TV show canceled by Sci-Fi. Shockingly,
I think it's called Defiance. Or no, Dishonored. It's Dishonored. In that game, those walkers are very tall things. It's almost like it's like a one-person thing, and it puts them 15, 20 feet off the ground. So the idea of the gnomes building something where they could traverse land very quickly that they wouldn't be able to because they're shorter, that's the only reason it
could reverse their disadvantage and turn it into an advantage depending on the quality of the vehicle.
Right.
I don't dislike that idea because right now what we're doing for those people who are out there, we're trying to figure out what problem are we trying to solve for the gnomes. And because I always say that's the foundation of building a vehicle, building any kind of prop is you're solving a problem, or sometimes creating a problem if you're a good storyteller, or both. But one of the problems is obviously gnomes are short, and so that would work out. My only fear with if you're a good storyteller, or both, but You know, and one of the problems is obviously gnomes are short, and so that would work out. My only fear with that one is with my gnomes' love of exterminating other races, and you start putting them in personal walkers. The two problems: one, culturally, they're co-op based, so them individually with prowess in a vehicle would be a bit countercultural, but not necessarily wrong.
Okay.
And two is with, like I said, their desire to exterminate other races. They become a bit derivative of Daleks over the ages. If they survive long enough to get to space, they're after Doctor Who.
Exterminate.
Why? Because you're something else. You're obviously impure.
Well, we also talked about all the tunnels in the mountain, and the idea of a pseudo elevator / subway car. So there's that too.
Which is interesting. I don't know how exciting it would be as a vehicle, but it would be very gnomish.
Part of me,
you could actually have probably a few variations of them depending on the purpose of the pod. So I think it's interesting from the gnome perspective. Subway cars might not be super interesting as an exciting vehicle, but I don't necessarily care about that either. I am a geek and I get into all the weird details sometimes. There's one other thing that we talked about which might be interesting to you.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, remind me, because I don't think
this is actually your idea. Making something for them to hunt.
I forgot
Which,
about
if you think about
that.
it, they are an island that's tropical, surrounded by lots of reefs. So typically, aquatic life typically comes, moves around over time. And as we talked about when we built the aquatic race, it would be maybe an interesting connection back to that episode.
And a boat makes a lot more sense than a land vehicle. I mean, we can make the tunnel thing. Or you could just say it's a thing, like, and not build it. That could be part of the framework. But I think
it's essentially a subway car.
Yeah, I think
and a couple of different sizes.
I think the boat makes more sense because they would. I mean, I would imagine a lot of their food would be seafood.
Yes.
So if only because they'd be a fish-eating people. I think it's the boat, but we have to get. I think it's going to be the boat, but we have to think about... Is there other sea problems that it would solve? Because obviously they're going to be fishing.
There was a potential second problem, right? And I kind of thought about this, but I don't think I brought it up when we were building the culture and or the race. Which is because of their extreme paranoia, they like to strike. At foes, but when they have kill shots, so they want to take foes down
in like a singular shot is the goal.
Well, they want to minimize the risk that people get away. So the faster that they can take them down, the better. But what I'm thinking is an interesting thing is here, possibly something that traverses underwater, and then can attack up and sort of ram up essentially.
I like that too. So do you want something that they nature of the beast? I'm thinking something that is heavy, but can travel underwater on the surface, like on the ground, like, so they're basically walking it into the water, but it's got to be heavy enough so that the air supply doesn't lift it off the ground. Because
there was actually an old submarine rumored back in, I think it was the time of Alexander the Great, and they didn't use it to attack, but what they did was and this is all possible BS, just maybe a strange memory Jeff made up, but I'm pretty sure that there's actual, not physical evidence, but like at least a theory of doing this, which was large rounded bell shields that literally troops could take underwater to cross underwater to get to a city that was like say Tyr, that is a island city just off the coast, but they could come in through the harbor and then come up undetected. So the idea of using air to trap in, I know, is something that at least the idea of it goes back into ancient cultures. So I like the idea of that. Obviously, they might have something to work in there. So, I like the idea that it's not a boat, that it's something that moves along the bottom, because it's a reef area. So it's very dangerous for boats to navigate in general. It has to be taller than them, and that's an advantage where the boats become. It's maybe an advantage for them to be short, because they have some strain and they have underwater docks, or maybe it's a pod that comes down and inserts into one of these.
Well, if you have a multi-chambered area, then you can absolutely establish an effective, airlock setup.
Oh yeah. I'm not worried about that. So I think there's maybe like a tunnel that lets water come in underneath the mountain, the mountains where their city is on the top, and they can take a tube down to get to either an airlock area or like I said, maybe even a natural one that had been converted, or it's something to where they've built out these underwater docks into an area where it's a little bit deeper and the boats are submerged there, but they would probably want the boats more hidden. So I'm thinking that they're inside the mountain and that they come down in a tube get out in an artificial airlock, one that just works off of gravity, and they go over and the vehicles actually are perched in there. They literally drive them right out underwater, so they're never exposed on the surface.
Now, do these things, or maybe they use a magic user to create air, do these things have a tether so that an air supply can be sent into it?
With their love,
because old school diving, that's what they did.
Yes,
they would have
definitely
a tube up to the boat, and it would send air down into the big steel. Or
I think they have a mechanism for that. They have a mechanism to tether it, which would tie off the range, and that's how they were initially used. But they've probably developed some magic to back up so they can untether them and get a little bit more range underwater.
So these are going to be... I'm trying to think. So they would need visibility. So is there glass involved? Is this immediately I'm thinking some sort of like dome. I'm thinking basically of like an upside down canoe or rowboat, but made of metal, so it's really thin, but heavy, but a little heavier. So that way it helps to hold the air down. And they can add more weight to it to compensate for the air volume. And if they're carrying it, then it either needs to be really well balanced, or it needs to be gasketed to them. Really well balanced so that it doesn't flip over on them and then all the water escapes and they drown in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or there could also be stabilizers that prevent that from occurring. But then once we're past that problem, if they're using it to go out to attack something from underneath, they need to be able to see.
Oh, most definitely. They need to be able to see up, and they need to be able to see forward at least. They probably have almost, I think, a porthole system. They do have glass technology in the Iron Age because they're obviously in the Renaissance era. It's probably magically reinforced, sort of like tempered, but it's probably thick too. So it's probably very hard to break the glass. There's probably a porthole or a couple on top. It depends on how big they're going to be. I think they're relatively small. I don't think they have a great depth. they can't go really deep. They probably have a maximum depth of let's say 30 fathoms. I don't even know what that means, but I just like the term fathoms.
Fathom's pretty deep. I think a fathom is like 12 feet.
Oh, okay.
I think. I'm guessing. It's been a while since I've had to know my.
I'll have to do some research.
I'm going to look real quick right now.
I think they have a system to make something relatively the equivalent of stainless steel. They I think use magic to help eliminate the carbon residue, which causes imperfection in early steel, which allows their steel to be very strong but resistant to rust as well.
1 fathom is 6 feet.
1 fathom is 6 feet. So 30 fathoms is 100. That's perfect. Okay.
That's pretty deep.
That's pretty deep. But it's by no way, they couldn't take this all the way into is 100. That's perfect. Okay.
That's pretty deep.
That's pretty deep. But it's by no way, they couldn't take this all the way into anywhere they want to in the ocean either.
Well,
so they're pretty much stuck to the reef area.
Well, yes, but if they're hollowing out a mountain, they can take a lot of that material and create effective sandbars. They could actually build underwater roads for these things. They could use
over time, but remember, part of it is they have a resistance of leaving the island.
Well,
so
no,
they would naturally be held back.
Not as a means to travel beyond the island, as a means to create an appropriate defense using this thing.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So surrounding the island is like a little highway system.
That
effectively
creates a depth of a very effective attack range. Mm-hmm. So they could, from here to here, as long as we're on the road, we're always going to be no less than 30 feet from the surface.
Okay. How do we want them to attack?
That's the next thing.
Because the one flaw of an effective attack that way is boats sink down. Not directly. It's not going to be an instantaneous drop, but that could cause a problem, and it would leave wreckage on your road essentially. Yeah, but they could clear that off with their device. I kind of like the canoe shape idea where the front of it kind of comes together, almost like a boat upside down. That way, it'll help push stuff off in front of them as they're moving.
I kind of like the idea that they're like ants. Is how I view them.
Oh, I like them as a crawler. I was thinking about that too. Like they have little metal legs that the gnomes.
The gnomes. They cross me as an ant-like thing. They're hive-minded. Mm-hmm. They work together. It's all about getting everything done. Mm-hmm. So them going to these efforts of building these underwater roads for this thing, and so they wreck a boat and it falls down on the road. Well, they'll just take the time and clean it all off and bring everything in, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Let's see. I'm trying to think of what would be an effect. They could obviously take out a longboat. That wouldn't be too difficult. But I'm trying to think if someone brought a small ship, or even a regular sailing vessel into the harbor, how would they take it out? If they bring something that is like an air style thing, like something they can push out of the vehicle and air carries it straight up to the bottom of the boat and sticks to the boat. Like, i.e., like a reverse depth charge. Or, part of me originally thought, just something to punch a hole in the bottom of the boat.
That's how I was thinking. It's sort of like a pneumatic kind of ram.
But you want to go that sophisticated, like a pneumatic ram?
Well, it obviously wouldn't be pneumatic, but
why?
Potentially,
why not? If they're tethered and they have an air supply, you could justify a pneumatic ram.
You just and if there's a mage on board, they could compress air into a chamber that is beneath the ram, and when enough pressure is built up, and the safety thing is released, it rams up.
On the flip side, you could come up with some form of
and the safety thing is released, it rams up.
On the flip side, you could come up with some form of water hydraulic and take advantage of the water weight. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if they're deep enough to have a super amount. I mean, obviously there's
the down pressure wouldn't be enough to create enough upward force, but but you might be able to like get water in there, and there'd be some there. You'd have to create some sort of. I'm just thinking of like a
more mechanically kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a way that they can do it physically without chalking magic into it. But I like the idea of an air ram or a pneumatic ram, or a pneumatic ram or a hydraulic ram. Like I like both.
I just don't know if the technology is quite advanced enough at this point. Like they're in the Renaissance era. If the technology is quite the point to build effective like water hydraulics.
Hydraulics were invented in 1796. The hydraulic press, invented by Joseph Brahma in 1796. So almost 1800, and they're not quite there yet.
Well, I would argue. I mean, there was hydraulic doors on temples in ancient Egypt, in the Potomac, Egypt. But the problem was you need heat to differentiate to give you the force, and then if you have something like that creates heat that's not magical, it's fire. And the problem with using fire would be it would eat up oxygen.
Right. That came later.
Sure.
That came even later. That came almost 1900.
Yeah, I know.
So
that's why if we go the ram route, well, I don't see how you could do it without magic.
Well, the original ram route I was considering would just be a physical, like not aided mechanically, but then I was like, well, these people are a little more advanced, and well, you figure someone goes spear fishing, you can move a spear through water pretty effectively. So, yes. Is there a way that they could use something like that could either attach to the bottom of the boat, i.e. a spear, and create a hole, or puncture and create a hole, or attach and maybe it wedges and opens up in a way where it forces. Maybe there's a dual. Have you ever seen the devices that mountain climbers will use that have? I can see it in my mind, but it's hard to explain what it is that mountain climbers will use that have. I can see it in my mind, but it's hard to explain what it looks like. It's basically you stick it into a crack, and when you pull it backwards, it cinches tighter and tighter in that crack. Does this, you know what I'm talking about? So I'm thinking of a device like that, but that it works in reverse, so that as you push into either straight into a piece of wood, it would obviously work best if you could hit a seam. So that it would divide the seam or tear into the grain.
I think the simplest solution, I think we're getting too complicated, is probably a screw. Essentially like a wooden screw that gets attached to the end of a device, and then what you can do is that screws into the boat. When you puncture the boat, the screw all the way through, you detach the screw from, a mechanical device inside of there. So the screw then releases and the metal thing comes free. But you'd need something to have the ability to rip off in case there was a problem.
Well, here's something else I'm thinking. What if, because the idea of a pole on a screw is something that we use something like that at work, and it's a thing where you can attach another piece to it. So you bring a bundle of lengths, and then you can attach to each end to make it longer and longer to reach where you need to reach. So let's say it's a device like that, and at the top of it you have this a threaded means of drilling into the bottom of the boat. So you have one of these style old hand crank drills, right? So you drill all the way up in. If that
and for people who can't see Michael, he's doing like the hands twisting.
Yeah.
But that would obviously be people twisting it.
Yeah. So that drills them in, and that gets a puncture into the boat. If they continue to push that, if you push them up, well, now you have a puncture into the boat, and they have black powder. They could bellows black powder up this pipe right into the bottom of the boat. How do you like that?
Like I said,
like that
the risk to that is if something goes wrong, your ship is attached to their ship.
Well, you can let go of it. You could push the pipe further up and push it through, and just abandon it and get it later.
Okay.
Or they can make more.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like that. That would be of little concern.
I like that idea. It's very modern, but it's not, and it works off a simple premise of screw, which has been around forever.
I mean, you're talking. We're basically talking about a drill. We're talking about a really long drill bit.
Yep.
And what
I like it.
It would have to be like a very bit, which is a conical shaped bit that's like a step bit, so that it bores, so that it bores as it goes, right? You could, I don't know how complicated they can make, but there's another kind of bit that
and also too, if the ship's coming in and the current, if the drill's against it, it will start drilling itself as the boat moves into it.
Ooh, that's
you don't think so?
I wasn't thinking about the motion of the boat itself. When you're drilling against something, it and you need to be stable. So on calm waters, this would work. But if the boat is rocking, the bit would bounce and it would move and it wouldn't bite. And if it did bite, you have a rigid pole, then it would.
And now it's shaking.
Exactly. Now it's moving. So there's something that needs to be ironed out there. Like I think the idea is I still like this idea a lot. So there's something that needs to be ironed out there. Like I think the idea is I still like this idea a lot.
Well, how about this? Why not just essentially maybe it's a one-shot ship because that's what they're trying to do. They have their defenses that are ready to fire to back it up, but essentially it's just a series of tubes that can break off. Worst case scenario, but it's just like a pointed ram that is pushed up, so they have to get to the correct depth, and then the legs of the craft push it as the boat's moving in towards them, which they would have to do. They'd have to sort of intercept the ship. But as that's happening, the ship would puncture into it, or it could be fired through the water, the tube, when it hits, essentially, and the tip is designed to break off after a bit. It would have to be engineered well. So when it goes in, the tip can break off, and you can then eject black powder and just start a fire. Or essentially an explosion, a black powder explosion is really what you're causing.
Yeah, like I like
so it's almost like a harpoon.
Yeah, I like the idea of some sort of black powder weapon. I really love the idea of some sort of reverse depth charge, something that they can literally just go like this, push it out from underneath the vehicle, and it floats right up.
You would need it to you would need it to be close enough to the ship to damage it. However, then and you're right above it, so you're gonna feel a lot of concussion off of a depth charge. So I just don't see a depth charge kind of thing working. So I like the sort of a harpoon that has several holes. It kind of goes in. They can yank it to break it, and then essentially it's tethered via a chain back to the initial ship. And then once they've done their deed, they release the chain, and it's gone until they can get someone to reload it, which there's probably a diver on board. But the reload time would be very slow on this weapon.
What if I'm wondering if we're not,
or
what if I'm wondering if we're not,
or even you could have a Greek fire type of thing where it pierces up the bottom and then it essentially ejaculates Greek fire into the bowels of the ship.
I like that a lot. I like that idea a whole heck of a lot.
Because then you don't have the problem of water rushing in and putting out the fire, but it would eat through the bottom of the boat and the boat would sink. So it wouldn't be as explosive. maybe some of the tubes have Greek fire, some of the tubes have black powder. When the two come into contact, the black powder explodes to help cause a bit of an explosion as it's eating out the bottom of the ship.
What if we're making this? Although I love all of these ideas,
Yes.
what if there is something a little more simple? Something as simple as we agree that the underwater road's cool, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I like that underwater.
So let's say they have a big chain that runs along the underwater road, i.e. like anchor chain. And they just attach something to the boat. It could be something small that they then use to haul up something bigger and bigger until they have the boat tethered just to the bottom, and then they just tear a big hole in it. Or just have, they physically anchor the boat so now they can't leave until the gnomes do what they got to do to put an end to the boat and everybody on it.
I hate that you brought up that idea.
Why? Because it's simpler?
It probably makes a lot more sense for the tech level.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Like
I'm getting into sort of advanced missile avionics down here, which is really cool.
I like these ideas, and maybe further down the road, that is something that they develop, and those
to the
chain
blocking a harbor, and so it's probably even built up off higher than the road. So if a ship has a really deep bow, it's going to ram into this. And the depth shouldn't be to the level where they think it's going to be there. So they don't think they're going to hit shore, but they could actually hit into this chain, which is kind of held up probably on posts built around here. And we're calling it a chain, but it's something.
I'm thinking not so much that they hit the chain with the bottom of the boat. Like I'm thinking of like they use something, i.e., like some sort of underwater style grappling hook that grabs it and it attaches itself to the boat, like some sort of like teeth that curl in and just latch onto the wood.
They could just be pushed out to grab onto.
Right. So
but I think the thing is the chain. And I'm calling it a chain, but I think it's actually a reef to grab onto.
Right. So
I think the thing is the chain, and I'm calling it a chain, but I think it's actually a reef. It's an artificial reef that's sort of built up. They've probably figured out over time that the reefs can grow, so they've built stuff along to encourage it to grow in a certain way. And that becomes the chain.
I think that they would, like, getting back to your desire for, overlapping fields of fire and, just like trap tactics. I think that they would probably set things up so that when something comes, like someone's approaching the island, there's an area that, like, is obviously like, okay, this is where you would bring a boat. Like, oh, there's a little bay here. Like, we'll go into the bay, and that's where we'll land. Now, I'm sure that they'll have some sort of defenses all around, but that would be like their obvious. Well, this is where the boat's going.
Yeah. Obviously, it's based off of currents. Most definitely. I mean, the reef, they've probably grown, over time. I don't know how long a reef takes to grow, but they've encouraged it, we'll say. So they have an artificial reef, I think, that goes around it. But these road areas, get very intricate in spots where the current will bring ships in, and currents are obvious. You could tell where currents go. You could tell sort of the flow of the ocean. So there's one coming out from a sort of a little sea inlet, and then there's the ocean, which sort of brings a bigger current out front. So there's a couple spots definitely that are expect opposition.
I like the idea of being able to attach the chain to the bottom of the boat and have it rip downward and like just rip a huge hole in the boat and then just sink them like that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just a harpoon, and the idea is the harpoon fires up, maybe even next to the reef, and then the reef's a little bit lower down. So if it's a smaller boat, essentially they just have a crank that, and then they'll follow multiples up if they need to, and they'll just keep cranking on this boat to where they're actually trying to bring it down to this reef to essentially tie it off. I'm
trying to think what.
And then if it breaks free, there's a bunch of holes in the bottom of the boat.
Well, right, yeah, that prevents them from getting very far. And this whole time we're talking about weapons and defenses. We haven't talked much about this vehicle.
Well, this is what the vehicle is, but I think I like the legs. We have to have legs on this.
So you like the legs are. I see the legs as outriggers. Do you see them as like legs that actually walk, or like just like table legs?
Yes, because if I don't get my missiles, I get legs that walk. That's the way it rolls.
How does it? Well, I was about to say, wouldn't it make more sense for it to roll? Wouldn't it make more sense for there to be wheels, not legs?
Yes.
All right, so you'll accept wheels over legs.
No, I said it makes more sense for it to have wheels. I'm taking away my missiles, but I'm giving myself legs.
But I don't.
And it brings in.
How are you going to justify legs as opposed to wheels? Aren't these mechanically minded people?
They're mechanically minded. Yes, wheels would make a lot of sense. But the problem. Wheels would make a lot of sense. But the problem is, like I said, sometimes there are imperfections that, you have corals start to grow on a spot and would block your road. So there's road maintenance that has to go on, which is natural. Legs could grapple onto a smaller road structure and more imperfections could persist. It would look less road-like and more like a rail. But like the legs just kind of go under and it just skitters along it like an ant.
So these have to be magical legs.
Yeah, they have to be.
Okay. Lieutenant Dan, you got magic legs. Okay, so we got magic legs. We have...
and there's a world building lesson there. Sometimes you just have to go. It's magic.
For it. Yeah, it's magic.
You don't have to. It's one of those things I would never explain in a book how it works.
Sense.
Like
magic legs, we have.
And there's a world building lesson there. Sometimes you just have to go. It's magic.
For it. Yeah, it's magic.
You don't have to. It's one of those things I would never explain in a book how it works.
Sense.
Like or in a story, but it works.
Okay, so it's going to be open air bottom, right? Mm-hmm. So they just have to step.
Your bell design.
They just have to step under it. Mm-hmm. There's going to be glass portholes on this thing, so they can look around and look above them. Mm-hmm. So their legs are going to be exposed to the water. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Is there any danger of sea creatures getting to their legs?
No. The ship itself is made of stainless steel, or essentially a version that they've come up with, which is similar. It's a carbon. Almost no imperfection carbon. Mm-hmm. So the steel is very resistant to rust, but it also, if a ship lands on it, it doesn't kill all of the people inside of there, but it's most of it has floor. So there's an open spot. Think of like the old, what was that old submarine movie or a TV show? And the divers would go out, they would swim out they'd get to a spot, it would open up and they would swim out from underneath the submarine.
Exactly. But my point is that I assume that they are standing and they are walking this thing.
No, because it has legs. It has
So legs. They stand inside of it.
Yes.
They don't.
Yes,
they don't.
There's a spot where they come up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I was thinking that they walked along the ocean floor with its motion.
No, something might touch them and that would be disgusting.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I was thinking it was like a man. I'm trying to make it as realistic and manual as possible, and that's what I had. That's what I was envisioning, and I was going to say because that would expose their feet and ankles or however how high. It's like a man. I'm trying to make it as realistic and manual as possible, and that's what I had. That's what I was envisioning, and I was going to say because that would expose their feet and ankles or however how high. Originally, my thought was that it was up to waist high, but with all the other things you're adding to it, then that you could get away with what you're talking about.
Yes. And probably my missiles too, but I'll give up on the missiles.
Well, I think it's
Because I'll go semi-missile.
I think
I like the harpoon grapples better. I think it makes more sense.
I love the idea of a reverse depth charge, something that floats upward and attaches to the boat and blows a hole in the bottom. I love that idea.
Yeah, I don't buy that one. I mean, because the problem is the concussion would F with them too, so they're not super deep. So
that is a very good point.
If they put a big explosion that's a depth charge kind of goes in every direction.
Yeah, and water doesn't compress. So when you talk about force underwater, it's traumatic.
Which is why depth charges work. Yep. So it's like you'd have to have my idea of ejecting material inside for the explosion part to be effective to protect them. But
I wish I could remember the what do you call it? The YouTube channel. There's this guy, he used to work for NASA, and he makes these fantastic YouTube videos where he's an engineer, and he engineers all this crazy stuff. And I mean, like, incredibly, really, like, stuff that he spends months and months and months and months on. Really just amazing stuff. And he had another YouTube channel guy on his channel one time, and they were talking about action movies and grenades. And they're like, what, and they're also talking about, like, there's that shot in movies where bullets travel far in water. They just can't.
Yeah,
they just
too
can't.
much friction.
There's right. And the thing about, so they got into talking about that, and they got into talking about grenades. They're like, if a standard pineapple style grenade, falls and it's near you, if you can get into, if it's going to land on the ground and you're near water, if you can get into the water, you're better off. If there is no water, you decrease your chances of being hurt by a grenade to 1.5% just by being 15 feet away, and by you put your feet towards the grenade and your head away from it so that you're creating the smallest surface area for a potential projectile to hit you. So you only need to be 15 feet away and perfectly aligned with it with your feet towards the grenade. So just dive to the ground to survive.
The only flaw with that are soldiers know that.
What's that?
Yeah. Soldiers do know that.
Well, of course. Yeah. But the thing about the water is they were like, okay, if the grenade's going to fall in the water, however, you do not want to be in the water because water doesn't compress. And they started talking about the physics of...
Because the concussion of it would be a lot greater than it would be.
The concussion of it, even if it were a little further away from you, would do so much internal damage to your body that you would die. Even if the projectiles don't hit you, just the concussion would destroy you.
Where a concussion on a grenade won't kill you above ground. Maybe if it lands like right on you, but it's designed the shrapnel to kill you. So, yeah, awesome. Okay, so do we have anything else here for our underwater spider boat? Ant boat.
Ant boat, spider boat.
Ant boat.
Ant boat, spider boat. We have what it's made of. So it's made of your stainless steel glass. There's obviously chain involved in all this business.
Well, the chain's not. Oh, you mean for the harpoon?
I'm just thinking of things that they would need to build and do to make it happen. So.
Yep. And so I think the three things that you notice is typically projectiles entering the bottom of your boat is the first thing, and that sort of is a dominant thing that you notice when you run into these things. If you do see them, they would probably have a dulled color on the outside to help them blend in more with the ocean, so that a green or a blue or a blue kind of coating put to them. But that'd only be if you didn't see them underwater. They'd probably be relatively hard to see underwater. And the third thing that you would notice is that they're all of metal, which is a very strange thing to see, a metal thing moving in an Iron Age. It's just an odd thing to see. So those are the three things. The most dominant being the grappling hooks entering the bottom of your boat as they're getting ready to sink you. And they're very heavy, so it makes it very hard to move them. With the legs can kind of dig in to the rail the railroad that they're walking on, essentially. I said with focus built up in areas that are highly likely for craft to come in. And so they can get to you in areas where you would assume that there is not the depth. But it'd be hard to get a boat here in the first place because of the reefs and mountains that sort of line the ocean around here. Three things that you would notice about this, and the one dominant one. So now for the world building task. Build another vehicle. And now I'm saying another vehicle, even though this is the first episode we built a vehicle in, we've actually done 2 at the time we made this show notes, but 3 other episodes. So really, this should be our 4th vehicle, even though I didn't tell you to build ones in the other episodes. But in theory, this is 4 episodes for building a vehicle. So build a vehicle per episode. So build 4 vehicles.
And we also have is that what you're saying? Oh, no, that's the resource. So the real world task of the day is to go check out Seize the GM podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yes. By the time this comes out, I'll have had plenty of fun with Derek and Gnomes, which I've started to do already in real life as this has come out.
Already noticed his reactions.
So let's go give them some downloads. It's a great show. Michael and I both have been interviewed by them on separate occasions. So probably the 2 best episodes. There's that humility of ours.
Yes. I think my episode was probably better. I'm just
you would. Because you're just not quite as humble as I am. Sorry. But yeah, go check out Seize the
Your humility knows no bounds.
Knows no bounds. Go download all of their episodes, listen through, interact with them in our group, or Seize the GM has their own Facebook group as well too, which I'm also in. Michael, I don't know if is or not.
I think I'm part of their Facebook group.
Yeah. But just great group of people, fun show. Let's help support all of the indie shows. These are getting. I don't know if is or not.
I think I'm part of their Facebook group.
Yeah, but just great group of people, fun show. Let's help support all of the indie shows out there. All these big companies are getting into the podcasting game, so this little guys gotta stick together a little bit. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them